Hello, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Story here on Keystroke Medium. I'm Josh Hayes here with Scott Moon, and today we're talking with Jo Zebedee, one of the 14 authors who contributed to Explorations Through the Wormhole, an anthology put on by Woodbridge Press. The Exploration series is a collection of themed short stories set in a shared universe where the authors were given a set of rules and technology, then set loose to create or destroy as they saw fit. Jo Zebedee, known for the Inheritance trilogy, contributed The Gates of the Temple to the anthology. And today we're going to talk to her about what it was like to write in a shared universe and what inspired the story. Jo, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Yeah, so I'm a sci-fi and fantasy author, and I live just outside of Belfast in Northern Ireland. So I write some things in space opera world and some things set in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I have 3 novels out to date and another one coming out in about a month, and lots of short stories.
Can you tell us a little bit about The Gates of the Temple?
So there is a wormhole. I kept to that bit.
Right, that was required.
Yeah. Okay, so the description of the story is that I have a world that is under an attack from each other. So they're quietly wiping out the world. We've lost the Balkans and whatnot. Poor Balkans, they always stick out that wee bit, don't they? They're an easy target. And my people in the world are looking for a way to end this war. And my main character is a pilot. I do like my sexy pilots, so we have a sexy pilot.
Who doesn't?
And he has lost his wife and child in this war, and he has stepped up for a very experimental trip for a wormhole to try and end the war. And en route, he has a mad Irish professor, because it's good fun, and a couple of other crew members, and they're going on this very unusual trip through, which nobody really knows what it entails except this professor, who's completely bonkers.
1.21 gigawatts.
Mad Irish professor.
So that's the premise, and that's where I started from.
Was that the first idea that you had for the contribution, or did it kind of grow from something else?
It was the weirdest experience. So Nathan gave me this here and said, would you like to submit? And I sort of spent, as you do, a couple of days sort of thinking about it and thinking, what will I do with this? Out of nowhere popped into my mind a very obscure pre-Christian stone on an island in Lough Erne in Northern Ireland. Yeah, and this is called the Janus stone because it has 2 faces to it. So there's a back face and a front face. And for some reason this came into my mind, and I thought maybe whatever's at the other end of this wormhole, have been depositing these here across the world as some sort of indication of an alien race. So I went on and I Googled it, and it turned out this Janus stone is the only one of its kind in the world. But it is called the Janus stone because the Roman god Janus is a 2-faced god. I thought that's quite cool.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It then turns out he's the god of gateways and openings. I thought,
really?
That's cool.
That is weird. When you said when you said this was the strangest experience, I was like, this sounds like a great story already.
Yeah.
And it's getting now the plot thickens.
Yeah. So and it turns out that one of the things about Janus is that his temple, the doors of the temple were open in war and closed in peace. Yeah. And again, it's this idea of the wormhole and where it takes you to and such like. So that's where it came from, if you like. And then I found out that Janus is also the name of a particle that's rough on one side and smooth on the other. So I actually have a double-ended wormhole, and you can see where that's coming from now.
Oh, yeah.
It says science is going out the window rapidly, but, it was too good to mix. So Janus is through it all and connects it all. And what it ends up is a story not just about science, but also about belief, and very much about belief, because I think once you bring mythology into things, I do have a bit of a belief that they knew something that we didn't. I went to the planetarium here recently to the star show, and they were saying that, the ancients knew so much more about the stars and about the world around them than we ever do, because we don't see it through light pollution, we don't see it, we don't look. So I sort of have this belief that there are things out there that we don't understand. So my story can't just be encapsulated as this is science. I mean, it's not hard science, but it became linked into that idea. So it was really just a case of, wow, I'll run with this and see where it takes me. It's too good not to. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was completely bizarre. It's not at all, anything that's ever happened to me before, just that series of connections. So
that's a very intriguing story about the story. I like that's a great creation story.
We've done a number of these interviews for the series.
Done a lot, yeah.
And it's always fun to hear how the stories come about, where the inspiration comes from. But it's also interesting to see the take that all the authors have taken on this theme. And I've said it before in shows that you give a group of 14 people a story idea about a wormhole, and you get 14 completely different stories that are different in theme, in tone, in location, and it's very cool to see that come full circle and have all that put into one book.
I write flash fiction stories, and they come from one single picture, and we get maybe 40 or 50 entries, and not a single one is similar.
Right.
And they're coming from one single picture as the source.
We know we talked earlier about novels and short stories. What would be your process for writing a short story for an anthology like this? Yeah.
One thing about me is I write very lean. There's no padding in my stories. So whenever I'm given a 5,000 word short story to write, I'm like, because about sort of maybe 2,000 to 3,000 is my comfort zone. So that actually brings me up that I'm filling it out more than I usually do. So I did a little bit more planning in the sense that this sort of had a 2-part story. But what I do is I sit down and I write the first draft, and then I usually leave it to sit for a couple of days, get a bit of brewing time, and then I go back and I fill in the bits and pieces that perhaps I'm notoriously a bit skimpy on description.
Right.
So I tell people what people look like, for instance, in the second draft, because the first draft was nothing like that.
During our other interview, when you were on the show, you had talked about writing mostly dialogue in a first draft and coming back around to it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so because my stories are always about the character, and until I know the character, I kind of struggle to tell the story, and I need to get to know their voice. So dialogue is a good way of getting to know that voice. I quite often start short stories in first person, even if they don't end up in first person, because you just get to know the person so well, so quickly. So I usually have this very skimpy dialogue-led, absolutely no description first draft, and then I fill that out from there. So, anytime I write a 5,000 word story, the first draft will be maybe 2,000-3,000 words at most, and then we expand out. And then once it's tidy, it's nice. Once I then have something that's vaguely readable, I then give it out to some beta readers, and in this instance, for instance, Thaddeus White, who's also in the anthology.
Right.
So I usually get maybe my writing group or somebody to put eyes on it and start to tell me where it maybe needs more, or where maybe it's not quite working. So I do that there, and then I tidy it up and hone it and send it off.
I'm a big fan of characters, and you've always said that you write very character-based stories, and that they're very important to your stories. So I can see the dialogue being helpful in that regard.
Yeah. And what I find is all my stories, all the characters in them have their own character. I'm not somebody who writes the same type of character a lot. Mm-hmm. They each take on their individual sort of personality and voice. So.
Do you know what your characters look like in your head? Do you have an image of them, or how they sound, or any kind of a marker to kind of keep them straight inside your head?
I actually have something called face blindness. Yeah, I did the Harvard University were doing some research on it a couple of years ago, and I did the online test, and it came back and largely said I was lucky to recognize my mother on a good day. So I am incredibly face blind, and I don't recognize people. Apparently, one of the side effects of being face blind is that visualization is a real problem for you. So I don't actually ever really have a good idea what my characters look like. I just know them from the inside.
Right. That's interesting. I hadn't heard of that, but that kind of, I may be on the same spectrum there of that at some point, because I don't see the faces as much more of a holistic kind of impression of what they look like, rather than I know a lot of people like pick an author or an actor they like and put their picture up, and that's their character. And I've never done that. I know it works for some people. It's not my favorite
I actually
thing.
just started doing that in my work in progress. I Googled actors that I thought looked like that character and then imported a picture so I can see it. But I kind of understand where you're coming from on the face blindness thing. When I write, I can see the scene and I can see everything about it, and then it has a disconnect from what I see in my head to what actually gets on the paper. It's like I can see it in my head, so I don't put it on the paper. And then when I go back in my second draft, I have to add all that stuff in.
Yeah.
Although there is a good argument that we shouldn't overdo description either, because people, if you say somebody walked into your living room, it doesn't matter what picture somebody has of that living room.
Right. Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve, and I was recently reading a very well-known, an author I like a lot, and he talked about this woman being attractive, except that she had a long chin and a flat nose. And and whenever people get these really specific things, I'm like, I'm imagining this really long chin, or like they'll say their eyes were as white as saucers, and I'm imagining that these eyes are like twice the size of a Yu-Gi-Oh monster, and so those real specific facial things have always been very jarring. But people do it. Best-selling, well-known traditional authors and like they do that really specific description of the face, which I wish they would stop. That's all I'm gonna say.
My problem is I write so close to the character, and I'm really strict on that point of view discipline. Yeah, so there's no drawing back at all. And I don't look at myself in the mirror and think, I brush out my lovely whatever, or I put on my snazzy glasses or whatever. You just don't think it. So if you don't think it, how do you put it into a story?
Right.
So I would admit that sometimes I can be a bit description light, because sometimes I just wonder, how do you do it? In that type of storytelling.
So can you tell us about how and kind of when you decided that you wanted to be a writer?
I did write a lot whenever I was a teenager. I'm actually quite surprised whenever I went back and looked how much I did write. And I certainly wanted to be a journalist whenever I was at school, because I went off and learned touch typing, and we had to go down to the school next to ours to learn it. So once a week I went down and learned how to type, and it's a great skill. It's really good to have as a writer. And then I did nothing about it. I put it away and didn't do anything about writing for 25 years, and didn't miss it.
Yeah.
Didn't feel anything was missing from my life. In fact, I subbed my first story to Jonathan Cape whenever I was about 14, and they sent me a lovely rejection letter telling me to keep writing, which was quite sweet.
Nice.
And then whenever I was 40, I started up again. See, I told the age this time. I didn't tell the age last time.
I'm way ahead of you.
So the year I turned 40, I started writing again, and found that I just really enjoyed the process. Really enjoyed getting to know the characters. And as I've become more confident, I just really think it's the thing that I want to do most and that I like doing most. So that was a bit of a revelation whenever you've gone 40 years of your life without missing something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's where and how it sort of started.
I guess there could be worse midlife crises than figuring out
you wanted
to be a writer.
Money.
Yeah. Exactly.
You could have to buy a big brand new truck or something like that.
Oh, come on now.
I have truck in.
I just bought a brand new truck.
Because somebody I know bought an awesome new truck, and now I have truck envy. You got to be from Kansas really to get that, but it's a real thing. All right, Joe, where can readers find your work and learn more about you as a writer and your products?
So my website is www.jozebedee.com, and on there I have links to the work, links to reviews, links to free short stories, and a link to a newsletter, so all sorts of stuff there. I'm on Twitter on JoZ1812, and we'll update there. And I'm on and off Facebook and the SFF Chronicles, which I think has had a couple of call-outs now, hasn't it?
Yeah. Okay, this has been Explorations Through the Wormhole. For Scott Moon, I'm Josh Hayes, and we have been behind the story of The Gate of the Temple by Jo Zebedee. The Through the Wormhole anthology is available now on Amazon, published by Woodbridge Press, where you can find Jo's story along with many others, so be sure to pick it up and give the stories a read for yourself. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Well, thank you, Jo, for coming on Behind the Story, and we'll see you later.
Thank you for having me.